Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're actually gonna continue our whole corset style subject that we started in last week's episode because I couldn't just let it rest. I wasn't really happy. I told you in the video already, I wasn't quite satisfied with how it turned out, how the dress turned out. It was wrinkly, therefore it didn't resemble my image I had in mind. Even though you guys were so kind in the comments telling me that it kind of looks like it's supposed to be like this, it gives a cool wrinkle effect or a ruffled effect, a ruche effect, which is quite nice, but that didn't change the fact that that wasn't what I intended it to look like. That's why I couldn't just let it rest, and I wanted to revisit the whole corset style items subject, and that's why we're making a corset style belt today. So if you haven't already, go watch the other video that I uploaded last week, the corset style mini dress. I'm gonna link it right here in the eye so you can click right there before you watch this one, because if you want to remake this garment, I am using the pattern I made in last week's episode for construction of this week's pattern. So I'm basically building upon it. But for everybody who is not so much into pattern making, I actually went ahead and digitized the pattern in a few sizes. I graded it, so you can click on the link below and download it if you so wish. With all of that out of the way, let's just jump right into the video. So these are the pattern pieces I created in last week's episode, but as we're making a belt today, I'm only going to be using the 6 main panels, so no bust and no hip pieces. I'm transferring the pattern pieces onto a piece of paper, aligning them at the waist and bust line. I then measure my waistline and calculate how I want to change the pattern. I want to have a lacing in the back, which means I have to make the waist tighter for it to have enough space. So I'm going to take an additional 2 centimeters out of the waist circumference, as it's easiest to divide it by 8 instead of 10, which is also okay, but just for measuring purposes it's easier to measure 5 millimeters, which is why I'm gonna take out 5 millimeters on every seam apart from the side seams. So to give it a bit of a better explanation, I have a measured 64 centimeters waist on this pattern. My waist is 65, so that should be fine. And I'm gonna take out an additional 2 centimeters out of every seam apart from the side seams, which means that I have to divide the 2 centimeters by 8 because I have 8 dividing seams, so 4 in total. And then 2 pieces for every seam, obviously, which is why I'm going to take out 5 millimeters on every pattern piece. So in total, it's going to end up being 2 centimeters smaller. I draw the new seams onto every pattern piece, which I altered before moving on to create the new shape of the belt. And as a last step, I also straighten out my center back line. I add a bit of information right away to not get confused later on and continue with my hemline. I know the center front goes pretty low on the corset that it's based on, which is not what I want for the belt. Therefore, I go down 9 centimeters lower than the waistline and 7 centimeters at the first dividing seam. I then eyeball a nice hemline which goes into the center back in a straight line all over the back pieces. The upper line I draw a bit lower and then also straight into the back. A small tip for the people who are working on a cutting board like I am, you can actually line up the lines that you're drawing with the ones on your board, so you can very easily, without measuring anything, draw a parallel line all across your working surface, which is pretty handy, especially for my project right now, as I did that with the waistline, the bust line, and then also the hemline, and in a second the upper corner, which is also just straight into the center back. these are my finished pieces. To be sure not to get in any wrinkly situation this time around, I iron on heavy interfacing on my main fabric and cut out the pattern pieces 3 times of that fabric. So 3 times my center front and then 6 times all the other remaining pieces. That's because the center front lays on fold. I suggest you don't use your good fabric scissors, especially with 6 layers of fabric. They're gonna end up breaking at some point, so I took my already discarded fabric scissors that I used years ago, which is still fine, but not really, so I guess you've been warned. I give everything a good iron and baste 2 of each pattern piece together. I want to add that I am using the same pattern for the lining, which doesn't have interfacing on. For sewing, I use piping in the seams again because I really like the look it created last time. I'm using an off-white piping for a little bit of contrast, and I iron all the seams open and sew the whole piece together, leaving the center back open. Moving on to boning, I'm using my Rigoline boning again, which is a flexible, stitchable polyester boning and added according to my lines on the pattern. The pattern I made and linked for you guys in the video description will also have those lines included, of course. I draw the lines on the wrong side of my piece with a washable marker. I make sure to alternate the sides the boning is bent to get a straight result in the end. I also utilize the bend of the boning in the center front to go towards the body once put on. This is what it ended up looking like. As you can see, the boning is in the wrong side of my piece. I give everything a good iron and continue with some fake boning channels that I decided I wanted to add. So I am using a cotton bias tape, which I'm just folding in the middle, and I'm fixing the fake boning channel onto every other seam, which I thought looked quite nicely, by stitching on either side of the boning channel, or the fake boning channel rather, while only sewing in one direction to avoid wrinkles. I also folded the center back edge inward and fixed it with another strip of boning for strength. Once done with that, I lay wrong sides of my piece and the lining together and fold the center back to hide the last boning strip. I then sew the two pieces together by stitching into the seam allowances on the top and bottom edge. I just wanted to add that I also went ahead and sewed my label into place before stitching both layers together, because otherwise you're either not gonna be able to machine stitch it or you're just gonna see the stitching through the main fabric. Sewing bias tape on both the hem and the upper edge creates a nice finish, which I'm gonna do as the next step. Now I have some space in the center back without any boning, which allows me to place grommets for the lacing. The position for the grommets will also be marked in my pattern, of course, and to lace the belt up, I mark the positions for the grommets on both sides. I use 9mm grommets in gold for this, which I tried to put in place by poking holes with my awl, but had to actually punch out the holes for the grommets to fit. I think this method with the awl is only working up until a certain size of grommets. I guess if you have anything bigger than 5 or 6mm, you're gonna end up having to punch out some fabric actually to get the grommets in place. Which is fine too, it worked perfectly fine for me, but of course you have to hammer the grommets in really well to avoid them coming loose and then also the fabric to just fray all over. I give it a last stretch and then hammer all the grommets in. You can use a tool like I have for this, or just the standard method, which are the tools that normally come with grommets anyways. You can use either one. This is what it ended up looking like with all the grommets in place. Now I take my ribbon, which I'm gonna use about 6 meters of my ribbon. I melt the edges to prevent fraying, which only works with synthetic ribbon, obviously, not with natural ribbon, and lace the belt up. And this is what it ended up looking like. I am so happy with the result, and it's an item that I wanted for such a long time already, but I never really came around to make one myself actually. It's such a nice addition to plain shirts or dresses, and the corset belt sweater look is so popular at the moment. I love the piping details, the slight color variety with the different tones of white. I think had I used only plain bleach white, it would have been too clean and unnatural looking, which is why I think the different materials really add to the look of the whole belt. So thanks so much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and ring the bell to get notified whenever I post, and you'll never miss any new videos. If you haven't already, please like this video and leave a comment down below with video suggestions or anything that you'd like me to make. I'd be very happy to read those and to make future projects out of them so we can kind of work together, which is what I really want to. I also have a community tab which I use very frequently currently. So if you haven't already, go ahead and check that out, as well as my Instagram. I'm gonna leave a link down in the description below. Follow me there because I post a lot of behind the scenes footage, and I'll take you kind of with me throughout my day of creating these videos, which is really, really fun. I'll see you next week. Bye guys!
Yeah.